So, as I was talking about on TikTok, this is about dreams and something I'm working on to help induce lucid dreaming, which is where you can control your dreams. Start us off with a true story of an old family friend from Russia. A man and a wife lived on the third floor of an apartment complex, and about 30 to 40 feet up. The man is an alcoholic, as most Russian men are. Some can control it, which are functioning alcoholics, some cannot. This guy used to come home drunk all the time and do weird shit. So this particular instance, he comes home wasted and decides to clean the windows. The wife, being used to this shit, just says, fuck it, go ahead. So a man climbs out on the balcony with a squeegee and a soap, and he starts cleaning the windows. 20 to 30 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. The wife opens the door, and there's the husband with a squeegee. The man was so drunk that he passed out while cleaning the windows. But he was so limber that when he hit the ground, in the bushes below, he didn't hurt himself, just a couple of scratches. Was obviously walked up the flight of stairs or took the elevator there, and he was fine. Nobody believed him, except for his wife, who actually witnessed the event, and months later, trying to prove it, drunkenly of course, again, to his friends that he did not hurt himself, jumped off of his balcony, and now he's paralyzed. So, an effort to make his paralysis not go to waste, we're going to do this. The reason that he didn't survive, I guess, the second fall was because he wasn't drunk enough. Meaning, when you're drunk or when you're limber, completely passed out and your muscles loose and your brain not trying to catch yourself, you actually take the fall or an impact of a fall much better. For instance, with judo, when you fall, the first thing they teach you is how to fall, by the way. When you fall, they teach you to slap the ground as you hit it. So for instance, if I was going to fall, they slap the ground, maybe breaking the hand, but saving the rest of the body. Emphasis on one hand, but the rest of your body will be limber as you're doing this. So the reason, like I just said, it was because he was limber. Now, there's something called a hypnic jerk. When we fall asleep, our body relaxes and all of our muscles go into simultaneous relaxation mode. As once you're asleep, you're limber. Once that happens, or sometimes rather, your brain doesn't know you're falling asleep and he thinks you're falling, so it tries to tense up and catch you, which is a terrible reflex to have if you're actually having a fall that could potentially severely hurt you. You should be limber. That's why unfortunately, a lot of people that are drunk and drive and get into accidents, they seem okay when the car is completely totaled because they were so drunk they passed out, and same thing happened as the guy that fell off the window. What I'm working on is something called inducing of lucid dreaming. There's a bunch of ways to induce lucid dreaming, but a lot of them are very, very difficult and doesn't really work because, as it turns out, when we dream, we shut off of our foreground conscious and our subconscious takes over. Our subconscious is very, very well aware of a lot of things that we are not, but vice versa. So, for instance, your subconscious doesn't know if an event is actually happening or you're remembering an event that triggers a memory, that triggers an emotion. So, I have to simulate the feeling of falling, but not the feeling of that jerk, the feeling of relaxation. And when that jerk happens, will induce lucid dreaming. So I don't know if you've ever held a child, or hopefully you've held a child without dropping it or them. You fake drop them. So you kind of like do this, and the kids usually love it because that sensation that you get, almost like a roller coaster when you go up and then it lets you down, that sensation of losing gravity is what causes this hypnic jerk. I need to simulate that while you're sleeping, which is very, very difficult to do because unless you have a bed that goes like this, it's going to be difficult. I have to figure out a way of that happening. Now, a couple of ways I have it is vibrating one part of your body to making it feel like you're falling. Now, I'm just going to sit here and try to spitball it live because, well, not live, but you know what I mean, because that's the best way I think, from the hip. And mind you, it's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. I woke up half an hour ago with this notion in my head, looked up dreaming, and this is where I am. This is how I do things, from the hip. Some call it ADHD, I call it genius. Why? Because I don't believe genius is a person or a thing or a place in geographical terms. I believe that genius is a place in time. Like you could walk into a situation at the appropriate time and happen to know everything about it more than anyone around you, to the point where people think that you're a fucking genius, but in reality you are at that moment because you know everything about it. which is why probably I prepare for things without knowing why the fuck I'm preparing. Anyway, how would I mimic something like this? There's got to be some physicists out there and people that do sleep studies, although I do believe that sleep is not, and dreams are not studied enough. For instance, we know a lot about the oceans, we think, so about 8%, but we don't know shit. So I can imagine that our subconscious mind, we know even less. For instance, psychologists, psychiatrists, were only starting to look at brain scans like a few years ago. So think about this, like if it's a surgeon working on a kidney, they know everything there is to know about the kidney. They've dissected a kidney before, they've seen a kidney before, they've seen kidneys problems, healthy kidneys, everything. But psychologists that are working on the human mind, which is obviously comes from the brain, mostly, I've never even looked at brain scans. So a lot of times diagnoses are wrong because they think that it's a Sigmund Freud problem or a, what is his name, George Jung problem, or whatever kind of problems that were isolated by other psychiatrists, psychologists in the past. Meanwhile, if they just looked at a brain scan, it would simply be a hormonal imbalance or a tumor somewhere that's blocking something that's causing reactions. For instance, there was a guy that had pedophilic tendencies to his stepdaughter out of nowhere. Went to the doctors and they discovered that there was a tumor. Removed the tumor and the tendencies went away. And then they came back because the doctors missed a piece. Upon removing it the second time, same thing. So you see, it depends on how our brain is wired, and it's so intricately wired that a small little here and there can spin a person into like a completely different fucking aspect of their life. There's a movie about this called Phenomenon, I believe, with John Travolta, where a man starts becoming smarter and smarter, and meaning he learns languages within minutes, he learns telekinesis, he learns how to perceive things that are outside of the normal realm of human understanding, because there's a tumor in his brain that unlocks this little part, but in a beneficial way. Long story short, he dies, but everyone figures it out. There is a way to simulate this. I know that there is, because there's a way to simulate anything. And if we're living in a simulation already, it should be even easier to do. I believe that when we dream, if we remembered everything we dream about, it would be that little aspect that everyone says that we use 10% of our brains. We don't use 10% of our brains. We use 100% of our brains. We use all the parts. It's just that some parts are inaccessible to us in our awakened logical state. So for example, right now, if I closed my eyes, I could predict what's going to happen in the next 30 seconds because I can know that I can get up and walk into my bedroom. But I can't predict something falling through the ceiling and hitting me like Donnie Darko. Unless I was, of course, Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko knew that he was about to die, and he split realities, which is why the whole movie is based upon the grandfather paradox, time travel, and or schizophrenia. Because as it turns out, psychosis and shamanism are one and the same. Yeah, psychosis and shamanism. People are so fucking lazy. In general, they're just lazy. The word coincidence in general is a term that is made up by lazy people that don't want to find a significance between two events, so it's just a coincidence. There's nothing that is a coincidence, or everything is a coincidence. There should be no gray area with this word. I hate the fact that there is. Either you live life that there's nothing a coincidence, and you find a meaning to everything, even if the meaning is small, or everything is a coincidence and it just happens because it is what it is. The gray area is like saying I kind of believe in Jesus. Come on. So, spitball with me here. How would we simulate the sensation of falling without actually having to fall while we're falling asleep or sleeping? So there's just dream machines that exist, that you put these goggles on your eyes. And since sleep cycles are usually about 90 minutes, so you go through REM 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Each of those cycles lasts about 90 minutes. So if you time it just right, where your alarm rings 90 minutes after, or 90 minutes has been completed, you wake up feeling refreshed, versus other times you wake up feeling groggy as shit because you woke up during the middle of the cycle versus at the end. So I needed to the point where, I guess the way to do it would be to be inducing a heart monitor or a sleep monitor. And when you are going into REM 2 to mimic that sensation of falling, that being the trigger. You see, there's different ways to trigger lucid dreaming. One of the ways that is most successful, but like I said, was very rarely applied successfully, because it's hard to do, is to have repetition in your brain. So if you're constantly walking around day after day asking yourself in wake in life, am I dreaming right now? Am I dreaming right now? Chances are you're going to do it in your dreams. Chances are, because chances are, but they're very slim. There's another way to do it, to write a word or something down on a piece of paper in black ink, white paper, and unfold it and fold it and keep reading it to yourself. Once you do that in your dream, you'll understand that since you can't read the word because it's very difficult to read in your dreams, there you are. You'll snap into lucid dreaming. Most of the times when we do lucid dream, we don't realize we're lucid dreaming. And actually, to tell you the truth, every single dream is a lucid dream. You just don't realize that you're controlling the scenario. So when you're dreaming that something's chasing you, or someone that you know is chasing you, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that your mind created the scenario in which someone you know is chasing you, and you're running away from that someone. Because there's a feeling that you don't want to deal with, but you have to, or you should. And that is why that someone is chasing you. It's not a person, it's the feeling you have towards that person. The person has nothing to do with the dream except for how you feel about them. So with that in mind, all of these things in mind combined, I believe that if we could tap into lucid dreaming, so for example, if there was someone that could lucid dream every single time they fell asleep, not only can they teach themselves physical things while sleeping, which by the way is very possible, I am living proof of that, and so is Einstein, Paul McCartney, and a bunch of other really, really smart and brilliant people. For instance, the melody to the song Yesterday, not the words, but dun 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 dun, was written in a lucid dream. Yeah, crazy. Einstein, when having trouble with one of his formulas and one of his whatever Einstein things he did, would induce lucid dreaming and then write out the formula. And when it wouldn't work in the dream, he knew where his errors were. So a person that could actually lucid dream every time they fell asleep, I believe would access those parts of the brain that we normally can't access while we're awake or even sleeping, thus becoming a person that could teach themselves things that are impossible to learn here. For instance, telekinesis. Now, I don't give a fuck who you are. I don't care if you're a scientist, a physicist, the most brilliant person on the planet. And in fact, if you were the most brilliant person on the planet, you'd know for a fact that you're not. You know what I mean? I don't care who you are, really. I can move physical objects with intentional thought. Yes, I can. How much? Like the tiniest fucking bit. I'm talking about I can move the lightest feather, a millimeter. Yes, I can. I've done it. I've done it live on TikTok. I've tried to prove myself to people on TikTok. But honestly, the only reason I did that is because I tried to prove it to myself. You see, a while back, I saw this video of a guy moving something called a psi wheel, which is that little thing you see under the glass there, a little piece of paper balanced on a needle, called a psi wheel. So without the glass, you put your hand next to it and it starts to spin. I'm like, it's got to be my breath. So I put a mask on. Still spins. Okay, there's got to be the heat from my hands, something called thermodynamics. As it turns out, there is someone on TikTok that debunks and will give $1,000 to anyone that could spin the psi wheel around twice under his conditions. And believe it or not, there was $1 million given away to people that could prove telekinesis under scientific conditions. Now, the thing about scientists is, as smart as they are, the scientific method is really geared for people like myself and other people that could potentially do something or just starting out to do something to fail. So the $1 million was under conditions of, if I throw a pair of dice onto a table, if you have telekinetic powers, you'd be able to make the dice land on the numbers that you wish, which is like saying, I'm strong. And for me to prove that I'm strong, I have to bench press a fucking 18-wheeler. I mean, well, yeah, I'm not that strong. Well, then you're not strong. Period. So even with this guy, I asked him, the guy on TikTok that one's giving away $1,000, Mr. Magic over here, I asked him, listen, dude, is it, and I was like, I don't give a shit about your money. Just talk with me here, like, layman's terms. What if it's possible that I can move in certain conditions and only in certain days a slightest bit of a lightest piece of paper? Sometimes. He's like, that's not how science works. Sometimes is sometimes. Let me tell you something. I hope you're listening, by the way, and everyone else. Sometimes, not sometimes, science works. Scientific method has been shat on by actual life a bunch of times. Let's take Einstein's theory of relativity and saying that there's nothing faster than the speed of light. Quantum entanglement disproved that theory. Fuck you. Two particles, like ions, for instance, or photons, particles of light that are quantum entangled, could be millions of miles away. And when one is measured, the other one will imprint that measurement. So that imprint of the measurement is faster than the speed of light, because light would take a couple of seconds to go 1,000,000 miles. Well, that doesn't though. So what's faster than the speed of light? Quantum entanglement. Go fuck yourself, Einstein. But that's not, and that's when science would step in. Well, that's not. Shut the fuck up. So as we learned, and actually, by the way, there's 4 laws of nature, right? There's electricity, gravity, and then the 2 that apply to atoms. Well, guess what? I don't know if you know what a muon is, but a muon is not a cow telling you to move. It is an electron charged with positively, I believe, charged electron or some shit like that. And it looks different because it spins like a top. But the friction of spin, or the rate of spin, does not go or fall in line with the laws of physics. It must be wrong then, right? So a muon, since it's not spinning as fast as we say it should be, is definitely wrong then. Or perhaps maybe Isaac Newton didn't know everything about a fucking apple falling on his head. What do you think, guys? Maybe you could take into account that the scientific method, although there's laws and theories and Neil deGrasse Tyson's, that they don't know everything. In fact, and by that, in the scientific method way of thinking, if you don't know everything, you don't know shit. Okay. So I can move physical matter with intentional thought. It's true. There's another example. There's a Roomba, like the robot vacuum, that they hatched a bunch of chickens next to it. And I know it sounds weird, but when a bird hatches, like a duck or a chicken, the first thing that bird sees, it automatically thinks that the mother. So obviously it wants nurturement, wants company, wants to be next to this mother. So it put a Roomba vacuum in front of a bunch of chicks that hatched. So all these chicks thought the Roomba was the mother. Then they put the Roomba in a room, and they let the Roomba do its thing, randomly go bouncing around walls, vacuuming the shit. And then they put the chicks next to it behind a glass panel. So the intention of the chicks wanting so badly to be with their mother, life and death, by the way, caused the Roomba to 90% change its trajectory to touch the wall where the chicks were. Now, scientific method or not, riddle me that, Batman. Where's your fucking scientific method? Same experiment was tried with a light and a random light and a plant. So there was 4 quadrants in a room, and a light was to be bouncing around the quadrants just like the Roomba was. And then they put a plant in one corner. And guess what happened to the light? The light, sooner rather than later, started being drawn to that specific quadrant where the plant was. What does that say? Does the plant have telekinetic powers? Was it just random that the light started not randomly going towards the light? No, there needs to be a balance. A balance needs to be attained. So if it is possible for the light to be shining on the plant, to attain that balance will be attained. Why am I going into all of this? Because I'm thinking, this is how I process thought. I go off on tangents and then I come back to my original theme. So we have to make something that's random, like the jerk that we experience when we fall asleep, not random. We need to make that controlled, people. Because I believe that the only option we have, all of us, a regular guy at home, not a millionaire or a scientist option, to unlock the mystical powers of everything that is human, is through dreams. Short of AI and all this billionaire shit that Elon Musk probably already knows, I want to get there without that. I want to be Batman without being Bruce Wayne. I want to be Spider-Man without getting bit by a fucking ant or a spider. I want to be Wolverine without the adamantium or the mutation powers. And we all can. Every single one of us, because like I said before, genius is not the man, nor the location and geography. Genius is the location and time. And right now, 30 seconds from now, this clip would be 20 minutes long exactly. And me sending this to you at this time, I know that it's going to be significant. And I know that this is the path that eventually will help most of us not only wake up, but gain the power that each of us need to discern exactly what should be done on this planet. And that is for the good of every single one of us to come out